Beth Miller nos abrió la puerta para empezar a hablar de temas tan importantes como la eutanasia por comportamiento, los problemas de conducta canina y una larga lista de etcéteras, etcéteras, que se engloban básicamente en lo que hemos ido tratando hasta ahora como la salud mental canina. Y evidentemente ella nos abrió la puerta y nosotros hemos decidido entrar de lleno. Bienvenidos a Diálogos INMAB, Ecos de Conciencia. Seguimos profundizando en estas temáticas porque hay mucho que decir, mucho que contar y, como decíamos la última vez con Linda Scroggins, mucho estigma que aún tenemos que seguir intentando derribar. Pero antes, deciros lo de siempre: suscribiros al canal, opinad sobre el vídeo, sobre la entrevista, dar me gusta, no me gusta, porque es la manera de que este programa crezca, que nuestro canal crezca, y si crecemos y llegamos más y más lejos, va a ser un beneficio para todos, que básicamente es de lo que se trata. Antes de seguir, vamos a buscar a nuestra compi Débora, que la tenemos por algún lado escondida y ya es hora de que aparezca y diga hola. Débora, ¿cómo estamos? Bienvenida. Cuéntanos, ¿qué tal?
Gracias, Rosa. Muchas gracias. ¿Cómo estás tú? ¿Todo bien por acá?
Bien, por aquí todo bien, con ganas de empezar y con muchísimas ganas de escuchar a nuestra invitada, que nuevamente volvemos a ser súper afortunadas y a tener un gran lujo de invitada, con lo cual no vamos a esperar mucho y decimos ya y le damos la bienvenida ya a la entrenadora canina certificada en comportamiento, esta vez desde Canadá, Sue Alexander. Sue, welcome to Diálogos INMAB. We are very happy to have you here. How are you?
Muchas gracias. That's about the extent of my Spanish. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here and quite pleased to have the opportunity to speak about this.
Okay, we are trying to enseñar Spanish to Sue, and we podremos hablar en todos los idiomas, in English, Spanish, and French too. Okay.
Oh, ben oui. Bonjour à tout le monde.
Thank you very much. Bueno, volviendo al grano, Débora, explícanos un poquito qué podemos, para que la gente conozca quién es Sue.
Sí, por supuesto. Me sumo ahí a la bienvenida. Les cuento un poco. Sue es una profesional del área del adiestramiento y comportamiento canino desde el año 99. Tiene una trayectoria marcada por su participación en distintas y prestigiosas actividades y eventos como la Conferencia Nacional de la Asociación Canadiense de Entrenadores Profesionales de Perros. Y además tiene constante presencia en conferencias internacionales, perros del servicio de parques, y ella ha en ese sentido dejado una gran huella y es una persona muy reconocida en este ámbito. Sue además participa en podcasts, programas de televisión, de radio, compartiendo y enseñando a todos un poco este mundo del entrenamiento canino, entre otras cosas. Y dentro de esas otras cosas están iniciativas muy innovadoras como Dogs in the Park, Losing Lulu, The Dogs Trainer Crucible, y esto ha sido muy innovador, como mencioné anteriormente, y lo que le ha hecho ganar espacios muy específicos y muy valorados en el ámbito del entrenamiento canino. Así que sin más demora, we're going to welcome you. And thanks again for being here. And we hope to have this fruitful conversation where you can share with us a little bit more about your background. And, you know, we were talking about all these different initiatives that you all have, you know, participated in or being a founder. And I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about that, like Losing Lulu, Dogs in the Park.
Sure. So in the mid-1980s, I had a German Shepherd dog named Newton, and I was not a professional trainer, and unfortunately, she was aggressive. And we ended up having to euthanize her for her behavior when she was about 2.5. And it was very, very sad, of course, and very upsetting. And a few months later, I got another dog named Buddy, and Buddy was brilliant. He was a wonderful, wonderful German Shepherd, and about 6 months later, I started having some trouble with him. So I went to the veterinarian and I said, what can I do? And she gave me some suggestions of some resources. So I started reading and learning, and then along came the internet, and I was training him, and things got a lot better with him. And then I met my husband, and my husband had a dog who was aggressive, and we didn't want to lose him. And I said, well, you should take him to dog training class. And my husband said, we're students. We can't go to school with the dogs. We don't have the money for that. And I said, well, I know how to train a dog. I'll start a class. So that was in the early 1990s that I started the classes, and we were training out in the parks. So we needed a name for our group, and we called it Dogs in the Park because that's where we were doing our training. Well, that was in 1993 that we started that. And so now we're 31 years old, and we have been doing that ever since. And in about 2000 or maybe 2001, I started doing it full time because I was making more money part time training dogs than I was full time at my other job. And then I went on and I got a certificate of dog behavior consulting. I got a certificate of professional dog training, and later I upgraded that so that it's knowledge and skills assessed. And then I got a certificate of behavior consulting canine, knowledge assessed. And I have been training dogs and doing behavior consulting ever since. So I got a whole lot of education along the way so that I could do that. Well, about in 2018, my friend Trish McMillan had a foster dog that she was taking care of. And her foster dog's name was Lulu, and Lulu attacked and almost killed another dog. And they couldn't rehome that dog. It wasn't ethical to rehome that dog because if they rehomed her, she was probably going to try and kill another dog. So rather than pass the problem along and pass it along and pass it along, they decided to euthanize her due to behavior. And of course, being very famous, Trish had a lot of contacts online, and she had said, you know, this happened. Most of her professional behavior colleagues said, well, this is a reasonable thing to do. You know, you can't have one dog who is killing another dog and then send it off to live in a home where there's going to be next door neighbor dogs and there's going to be dogs who walk by on the street, because then we're just going to end up with a whole lot of trauma, a whole lot of dangerous attacks, and a whole lot of tragedy. So the rescue that owned Lulu agreed and they euthanized her. But the public did not agree. And it was actually, there were some funny moments because Trish got a lot of comments on her social media from people who didn't know her very well, where they said things like, why didn't you hire a trainer? Well, Trish is an expert, an international expert in aggression. She is a trainer. If she can't solve the problem, nobody's going to be able to solve the problem. And, you know, people said things that were really, truly unkind. They said things like, if you can't take care of a dog like Lulu, you don't deserve to live. And so they were making an equation of her inability to resolve this dog's problems, that somehow or another she was a bad person. And they were saying things that were truly, truly unkind. And so what happened was, on her personal wall, on her personal social media, the trainers were talking about this, and we were all saying, yeah, it's happened to me too. I've had to euthanize a dog. And the public doesn't understand it. I have had Reddit threads that say, all Sue Alexander wants to do is kill dogs. And that's not true. That's not at all true. But what I don't want to have are dangerous dogs out there who could kill another dog or a human being, who could injure somebody, maybe take out a child. I don't think that that's appropriate, and I don't think that that's what our relationship with dogs should be all about. And so what happens is, because there's this misunderstanding between the general public and the professionals who have to work with these dangerous animals, then we get a lot of clashes. And everybody was saying, we need a support group. We need a support group to help when a behavioral euthanasia happens, so that when people say to us, you were wrong. We can have someone who says, I know people are saying that, but it's not true. And I know that you really loved your animal companion or friend. And we needed a place for that to be. And originally it was just trainers. It wasn't anybody else. It was just professional trainers. But very, very quickly, it became pet owners. And right now we are at about 31,000 members. So 31,000 people have been touched by behavioral euthanasia. And when I say touched by behavioral euthanasia, what I mean is you may have been a family member whose family pet was dangerous or had a profound behavior problem, and you may have directly had a loss. You could be a veterinarian who had a lovely, say, cat who had impossible house training issues and who was, maybe 3 or 4 years old. You had done all of the diagnostics that you could. You had tried medication, and this cat was still so distressed that they were toileting all through the house. And, you tried having the dog live or the cat live on a farm, but the cat had substate preferences, and whenever it could, it would do things like urinate or defecate on the chairs in the barn. And that happens. And sometimes the answer is this animal is behaviorally unhealthy and we have to euthanize. You could be a trainer who had a client and you were trying to help them. Maybe you're a horse trainer and you had a client whose horse was truly dangerous. And I had a horse that we had to euthanize because although she wasn't unkind, she was very, very dangerous. And so we weren't able to help her and we had to euthanize her. But maybe that was, my trainer could be part of our group because she cried when Kayak died too. And the thing to understand about it is losing Lulu is all about grief support. It is about supporting anyone who has suffered a loss and who needs help. And we're international. You will occasionally see posts in other languages. We've had posts in English, French, and Spanish. But if somebody needed to make a post in Russian, I would find a translation of what they had to say. If somebody had a post in Japanese or Korean, I would find a way to translate it and make sure that people could access it, because it crosses all kinds of boundaries. It's not just language boundaries. It's not just culture. It's not just geography. Because when we choose to include animals in our lives, we have to find a way to make this work for the animals and for the people. And when it is not working, sometimes we're faced with decisions that have to be made in the interest of the animal's welfare. And what I want everybody to understand about behavioral euthanasia is this is not a convenience. This isn't something that happens because, oh, well, I didn't feel like feeding the dog. Or, oh, well, it was inconvenient to have to exercise my dog. It is always inconvenient to do something with an animal in our life. It may be inconvenient to groom them. It may be inconvenient to have to go to the veterinarian's office. That is not why we euthanize animals. An animal who is not behaving normally within our homes and our lives does not have good welfare. And so from my perspective, when we talk about behavioral euthanasia, we're talking about an act of love. We're talking about releasing an animal from its suffering. So if you have a cat and you live, in the city, and that cat is scratching everybody who comes in your home and attacking their feet or attacking their legs, that's not normal. And that's not a good quality of life, because it means that every time that somebody comes in, the cat feels that they are at so much risk that they have to defend themselves. So when the cat owner comes to the trainer or the cat behavior consultant or the veterinarian or even a psychologist and says, I can't live with this animal, we need to understand that they are not saying that because they don't love the animal. They're saying that because they do love the animal. And we have to make room to talk about this in a rational and thoughtful way. So I heard you say, I think pasión in Spanish. Yes, I'm passionate about this. I'm very passionate about it. I pick up my
Yeah.
words here and there.
No.
So that makes up a huge part of my life. The other thing that I do is I run something called the Dog Trainer's Crucible, and the Dog Trainer's Crucible is a business to business where I help other dog trainers. I have education resources and some business resources. I do mentoring, so I do a lot of stuff like that too.
Amazing. Thank you for the the whole description. It's very interesting. We are gonna come back later on Losing Lulu, which is a specific topic that we really are interested in. But I would like to bring you a little bit back and start talking about training. So when you start talking about your you started, your whole personal story with a personal case of a dog issue, right? A behavioral aggressive behavior. So in your experience, in your opinion, when is the best time to start seeking for training or support for your puppy or your dog?
Well, that is a brilliant question. As far as I'm concerned, training should start before you come home. And what I mean by that is that if you don't plan your home to be successful with your puppy, you're not going to be successful with your puppy. And too many people, they get a puppy and the first thing that they get is the puppy. And then on the way home from getting the puppy, whether they get it from a rescue or a breeder, or they found the puppy, or, their brother-in-law had a litter of puppies, they get the puppy first, and then they go out and they buy the collar and the leash and the balls, and they get home, and the puppy is terrorizing the house, and they say, wait, maybe I should have gotten a crate too. And then they get a crate, and then they buy the fence for the backyard, and that's backwards. In my opinion, training your puppy starts about 2 weeks before you get your puppy. You need to have your puppy's food, water bowl, a safe place for your puppy to rest that is confined where they're not going to get into things that will make them ill. They need to have toys, and you need to have a plan. And what I suggest to people who come to me for advice is, for the week before you get your puppy, get up at about 6 in the morning, go down, go outside for a minute, say hello to the sunshine, breathe in the fresh air, look around, go in. You can go back to bed if you want, but your puppy's going to want to get up as soon as it gets light. And run your life as though you had your puppy for a week before you get your puppy, so that when your puppy comes home, you're ready. Puppies do not need to be walked. You do not need to put in a 45-minute dog walk in there, because they don't need to do that. It's not good for an 8-week-old puppy to do that. Don't bring your puppy home until he is between 49 and 64 days of age. And we have evidence of this, that this is important. Between 7 and 9 weeks is when puppies should come home. So if the breeder says to you, oh yeah, the puppies aren't nursing anymore, you can have this puppy, you say, oh no, he's not cooked yet, and leave that puppy there. Otherwise, if you're getting an older puppy, make sure that that puppy has had good socialization. I feel that it is important that from day one, you know what the rules are for your puppy. Young puppies should not be on furniture because they fall off and break their legs. So a dog should not be allowed on furniture until they're about 6 months of age. So you want to be having lots of lap time. Lap time is not the same as putting the puppy on the furniture, but you need to know what the rules are that you're going to have. In my house, the dogs are not allowed to get on the furniture. Not ever. Because I live on a farm, we have a lot of mud. I do not need mud and manure on my sofa. I just don't like it. Maybe I'm different, but I don't like having mud and manure on my sofa, so my dogs are not allowed on the sofa. They know that. They all have beds of their own. And so I had a bed available for my puppy in the living room before he came home. And I was able, when he was a baby, to sit on the bed with Treatos and feed him treats and play funny puppy games and that kind of thing. I like to see puppies get into class in the first week that they're home, not necessarily the first day, although I don't think that's wrong. Okay, I do like to get them in class before they are 10 weeks of age, because statistically we know that puppies who get into class before 10 weeks have a better chance of avoiding behavior problems. And what I say to all of my veterinary colleagues is, would you recommend that your clients didn't vaccinate? And all my veterinary colleagues say, well, of course not. And I say, well, as a behavior person, I'm going to tell you that I recommend puppy class because it is behavioral vaccination. In my opinion, puppy class should not just be a free-for-all where the puppies just get put down and they get to run around and bully each other and so on, but neither should it not have play. I think play is a very important part of puppy class, and it should be carefully structured by people who know what they're doing and can help those puppies who are too tough to learn that being too tough loses you a turn, and the puppies who are shy learn that coming forward and participating is safe. And these are some of the things that we can do to help your puppy to be successful. So what I want to do is I want to say, to avoid behavior problems, don't wait till there's a problem. And if you think about it, this is exactly how we raise our children. We don't say, when does your child go to school? We wouldn't say, oh, well, when he decided that he wanted to be a doctor, then we sent him to learn how to read. We say, no, there's foundational information that kid needs in order to make good choices. So we're going to send him out to, nursery school where he's going to get to do structured play that is age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. And then we're going to send him to kindergarten where he's going to learn his colors and his shapes and his ABC. And then we'll send him to first grade where he's going to learn how to, spell and add. And then in high school, when they're, getting ready to graduate, we can say to them, what would you like to do? And the kid can say, there's nothing I want to do more than be a carpenter, or there's nothing I'm really more interested in than nuclear physics. And they have all the background to do that. And so when we're looking at a dog, if you say, okay, I don't want my dog to do anything, I say, get a stuffed animal. Everybody wants their dog to do something. And so what happens is they need to understand that in order to have a pet dog who doesn't rush out the door and knock people over, who walks nicely on a leash, who doesn't jump on the counters, who is able to cope with, Christmas time when you bring a tree in the house, or your national holidays where everybody jumps up and down and sings the national anthem and waves a flag in your living room. It doesn't matter what it is that you're asking the dog to do. They have to have background understanding of what life is all about. And if you don't teach them when they're young, you are going to have a hard time when they're old. And one of the things that I encourage people to think about is take a refresher class with your dog once a year. Take an 8-week class once a year. Because if you're having problems with your dog and you come into your refresher class when your dog is, say, a year old, and you say to the trainer says to you, what do you want to work on? And you say, well, I want to work on sit, stay, come when called, walk on a loose leash, and maybe a couple of tricks. And the trainer says, okay, and you get 3 weeks in, and you say to the trainer, when he's on leash, he barks at other dogs. The trainer can go, oh, let me ask you some more questions. So once a year, you go in for that refresher class, just like you'd go to the veterinarian, and they're going to say, let me look at his poop and see whether or not he's got worms. Let me listen to his heart, make sure it's healthy. Let me listen to his lungs, make sure they're healthy. You do that once a year. Why don't we do behavioral checkups once a year too? And a behavioral checkup is just, I'm going to take a class and we're going to see if we can uncover any problems. And sometimes, I'd rather see somebody who said to me, look, my dog is driving me crazy. He barks at the living room window every day, and it's really driving me and my family crazy, and say, okay, well, let me talk to you about that. Oh, I can tell you over the phone. This is when the children come home from school. You know it happens every day at 3:15. Put them out in the backyard and with some food or a bone to chew on at 3:15. It's not really a problem. It's just annoying. But if you say to me in your annual behavioral checkup, oh yeah, you know, my dog had a cut on his foot and this happened 6 months ago, and it gets better when we bandage it and he's wearing his cone, but as soon as we take his cone off, he licks at his wrist, even though it's still healed. I'm going to say, okay, I need more information. I want to know more stuff because there might be a problem going on. And I think that if we can get in the habit of looking for behavior professionals and doing an annual behavioral checkup, we could head off an awful lot of problems. What's really difficult is when somebody says, well, my dog has a problem. He bit the neighbor's child, and he chased a cyclist down the road, and he knocked over the mailman. And now Canada Post won't deliver mail to me anymore, and I have to get help. And I go, okay, well, you know, when's the last time you saw somebody for behavior? And they say, well, we went to puppy school, but that was 6 years ago. And I'm going to say, okay, that dog did not suddenly go from I'm perfectly normal, easy, relaxed, happy, going friendly to everybody, to biting the neighbor's children, to chasing bicycles, and to biting your mailman. That is not normal. And at that point, I have to go back and take a history and find out when the problem started. So I think it's a little bit like treating cancer. If you go in for an annual checkup with your doctor and your doctor says, okay, you know, how's your appetite? You know, do you have any problems? Can you walk up and down the stairs without getting out of breath? And you say to your doctor, oh, well, I've had no appetite at all for 4 months. The doctor's going to say, oh, wait a minute, let's follow up on that. Let's follow that back. But if you wait until, you know, you're 70 pounds underweight, you're not digesting any food, and you're falling over and collapsing, the doctor's going to go, oh, there's a big problem. We have to do a lot more diagnostics. We have to do a lot more to help. And hey, I don't think you're well. And that's where we find those big problems. So I think it's a little bit like diagnosing cancer. The earlier we can find out the behavior problem, the better. And prevention is absolutely the best behavioral medicine that there is. There's my long answer.
That's amazing and so insightful. I mean, behavioral checkups like annually, that's amazing. That's actually new for me. I'm assuming most of the people don't do that. And probably
I don't know anybody who does.
They probably go to you when they already have one or more issues, right? So what are the most common issues that people, you know, go to you and are desperate about?
By far, the most common issue I see is aggression. So about 80% of my caseload is aggression. And it comes to me in different names. People will say, oh, my dog is reactive. And I say, what do you mean he's reactive? And they say, well, he bit the neighbor's kid. And I'm like, that's not reactive, that's aggressive. And, you know, so I think that what happens is we have to understand is that people don't think about it as a problem until there's been an injury. And, you know, unfortunately, that's often at the point where you're looking at a lot more work, a lot more effort, a lot more involvement. And so, you know, what do you do at that point? You have to then work harder. So, yeah, aggression by far. I've certainly seen a wide range of behavior problems. I saw one dog who licked a hole through the linoleum in the kitchen floor. It took him about 6 months to do it, but basically anytime the dog wasn't supervised, he licked the kitchen floor. He was also a light chaser, so if there was a reflection on something, that he would chase it. And we figured out that the hole on the kitchen floor was where you know, on your curtains, right? You have curtains with a pattern on them. And this was like lace curtains, and it had one hole, and that is where the light came through, and it hit the floor. And because it was a light in a shadowed area, then the dog would lick it. And once he started licking it, it became a compulsion. The dog just kept licking and licking and licking and licking and licking and licking. And we were able to help that dog with medication and changing the curtains.
And I was actually thinking about that. Like, what's your personal approach to treat or address aggression? Like, do you have like a specific method? It's very tailored.
It's very, very tailored. And what I do is I use a model that I developed called the good dog model, because nobody ever called me up and says, I have a horrible dog that I don't want to help. They all say the same thing. I have a good dog, but he's got a problem. And so I use a model. The first thing is, let's manage things so that we don't see the problem. So what this means is understanding what is the antecedent to the behavior. So let's just say that you've got a dog who rushes the door every time the doorbell is rung. The easiest solution to that, and it is an almost permanent, immediate solution, is unhook your doorbell so that nobody can ring it anymore. Now the dog isn't rushing the door every time the doorbell rings because the doorbell doesn't ring. That's called managing the environment. Okay, so you have to understand what happens right before the behavior problem. But that's not going to solve it, because people are either going to get a new doorbell or they're going to knock on the door and the problem is going to reemerge. So what we have to do is we have to teach the dog that the sound of somebody being at the door does not mean what it previously did. So for a lot of dogs, they rush the doorbell because they're super excited to see people. They're really keen. They want to do this. It's going to be great fun. Okay, but then they get frustrated, and that's where the aggression comes in. So what we start doing is we buy a new doorbell and we hook it up to a battery, and I just have the guardians, they will ring the doorbell. And let's say the old doorbell went ding dong and the new doorbell goes beep beep. Okay, and so you hit it, it goes beep beep, you drop a treat. Beep beep, drop a treat. So we're changing the motivation. So once we understand what predicts the behavior, we say, yeah, we're going to take that away and we're going to change the motivation. We're going to change how you feel about that. Well, what I will do with doorbells in particular, because a very common problem is, I will actually teach them that the new doorbell means go lie in your crate. Just go lie in your crate. Okay, beep, beep, throw the food in the crate. Beep, beep, throw the food in the crate. Doesn't take long before the dog goes, hey, beep, beep, I better get, wherever I am in the house, I need to get to my crate right away because there's going to be food there. Then what I do is I start training new behaviors. So the new behavior is when somebody is coming in, you need to go to your crate. You're going to feel great about it. So all I have the people do is I have them, once the dog understands to go to the crate, as they go to the answer the door and let the people in, close and lock the crate door so that the dog can't get out, and drop a handful of really nice treats. Go and get your guest in. They sit at the kitchen table. When the dog is calm and the people are calm, then the dog can come out. Very, very, very easy to solve. So I manage the environment by changing the doorbell. That means we're not going to get the old signal to say you need to rush the door and bark at people and maybe grab their legs. Then we teach them the new signal. We change the motivation. Change how they feel about it. So instead of feeling bad and anxious and frustrated at ding dong, we teach them beep beep makes you feel good. And then we teach them that beep beep means go to your crate. So we train a new behavior. This model of manage the environment, change the motivation, and train new behaviors worked pretty much with every single behavior problem. So with my dog that was licking the kitchen floor, we managed it by preventing the dog from being in the kitchen because he didn't do it anywhere other than the kitchen. We replaced the linoleum so that that visual trigger of the linoleum having the big hole in it wasn't there. And we got a filter for the window so that there was no longer a bright spot on the floor. So we managed the environment by changing the stimulus. And then what we did was we started teaching the dog that when he went through the kitchen, he wasn't to stop at that spot. So basically, we played games in the kitchen of teaching the dog that as he came to the spot, he was to keep going. So we played all kinds of games where we stood by the spot, the dog would come in, we'd throw a treat over there. Okay, or we'd call the dog across the spot. And what we did was we used medication to change the dog's motivation for light chasing. So we decreased that drive medically. And this is where behavior consultants and veterinarians often need to work closely together to resolve behavior problems, because that wasn't something that I was going to be able to teach the medication or change the motivation by pairing the light with food. I wasn't going to be able to change how the dog felt about it. What we had to do was change the dog's motivation chemically with the help of the veterinarian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's a very flexible model. I teach workshops, like weekend-long workshops, in how to apply this, and it works really well.
It sounds really amazing, like this method, and I was also thinking about the biggest issue that you mentioned, which is aggression, right? So how do you link those, like specifically for aggression, and when is or what are the first signs when you are thinking this might be beyond, training, it needs more, help, or it's definitely nothing to do about it?
The very first question that I'm going to ask that's going to help me to determine that is, how bad is the aggression? And there are two scales that I'm going to use. The first scale is the Dunbar bite scale. So a level 1 bite is just air snapping. There's no touching. It may be barking. It may be lunging. That's fairly easy to resolve. No matter how entrenched it is, it's fairly easy to resolve. The second one is if the dog puts a tooth on somebody and maybe they got a graze or a bruise, but there's no punctures. Level 3 is up to 4 punctures, up to half the depth of the canine. Anything that's level 1, 2, and 3, I am going to encourage people to keep trying. Keep working on it. Level 4, though, is when there are multiple bites. So there are more than 4 holes on the victim, or there is bidirectional tearing. Level 5 is if the dog sends somebody to hospital. And level 6 is if somebody has died as a result of the attack. If we are talking about, somebody calls me up and they say, my dog killed my sister, I am going to tell them, I will not work with you. That's not safe. And the only humane thing, in my opinion, is to euthanize the dog. Because the very first question I have to ask is, will it be safe for me to work with this dog? And will it be safe for this dog to live in society? And if the answer is it's not going to be safe, then I don't think we should keep going. I think at that point we need to say, how do we make the dog's last few days to be as kind and gentle and thoughtful as possible? How do we avoid the problems so that we can euthanize this dog in love? I think that is so important. Okay. Can I resolve a dog who has killed somebody? Maybe, but I'm not willing to take the gamble. I think that's like saying, yeah, we're going to drive the car down the highway with no brakes. I might be able to do it. Probably. Betcha that just using, an understanding of Newton's laws, I could probably get from here to Toronto without getting in a car crash, but it's not a good idea. In fact, it's a really, really bad idea, and the chance is somebody's going to get badly hurt, so don't do that. I don't think that keeping a dog like that in complete isolation is mentally healthy or humane to the dog. But when we have a dog who has killed someone, I think that euthanasia is the only option. When we have a dog who has mauled somebody, so they've sent the person to hospital, maybe the person lost a hand due to multiple bites to the hand, I don't think we should work with those dogs. I don't think that it is safe to work with those dogs. I think that in that case, we need to say the kindest thing that I can do is say goodbye. It's the same thing as having, the dog who's killed somebody. Yeah, we can drive with really crappy brakes, better than driving with no brakes, but somebody's going to get hurt. And I don't want to be responsible for my next door neighbor having to have surgery because I wanted to keep that dog alive, no matter how much I love that dog. And I have had to say goodbye to animals I have loved very, very, very much. Okay, my horse Kayak, a lovely horse. And she was my very good friend for many, many years. But when she got an injury that meant she couldn't get exercise, she was very dangerous. And, should I wait until she gets into a car accident and causes somebody's car to run off the road and somebody to die to say, okay, yeah, we should probably euthanize her? Or should I be aware of the fact that she could cause damage? And I felt that it was more humane to be aware that she wasn't safe to live with. Level 4 bites, those I'm a bit more on the line with. If you've had a couple of bites in one attack, I will work with you. But if you are not being smart about it, I will not work with you. And by that, what I mean, I had a client who had a dog who had bitten over 50 people. And they wanted to keep working with this dog. There were so many bites, and some of them were not great bites. She sent a couple of people to the hospital to get stitches, and they were going to have a Christmas party. And I told them they needed to keep the dog in her outdoor kennel with a padlock on the gate. And we had a big argument about it. I said, no, you need to have a padlock on your gate. Well, they didn't have a padlock on the gate. The owner's brother came. He was drinking. And he said, I'm going to show that stupid dog trainer how wonderful this dog really is. And he took the dog in the house. There were 50 people in the house. And the dog sent a woman to the hospital for over 50 stitches in her arm. And I said to them, I can't work with you because you did not keep this dog safe. You put her in a position where she was going to make a mistake. And I said, it's not safe for me to work with you. And we ended up euthanizing the dog. It was an awful experience. And so, sometimes I have to keep in mind as well, who am I working with? If I'm working with somebody who says, look, Sue, we have to have 50 people over, and what do you think I should do? And I say, well, why don't we board her at the veterinarians, and they know how to take care of her, and they go, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and they do it, then I don't have a problem working with a family like that. But when I have to work with a family who is going to make a mistake that's going to cause damage, I won't work with them, and I'll recommend behavioral euthanasia. I also look at the frequency of the incidences. If there has been one incident and you've called me and the dog, bit you while you were trying to take his food bowl away and you have one small puncture hole, that's got a really good prognosis. But if there have been over 50 bites, I'm probably not going to work with you anymore. I used to. But what that tells me is you have a really high tolerance for the oopsies. You have a really high tolerance for things that I have no tolerance for. And, in a case like that, where you've got a dog who has multiple bites, I don't see that this is going anywhere. I don't see that this is a problem we're going to be able to solve. Next thing I look at after that is the dog's overall welfare. So if I have a dog, say, who has separation anxiety, very, very sweet dog, very nice dog, but you can't go anywhere. You can't go out the front door and close the door to talk to the guy who brought you your package. without the dog being in a panic, I'm going to tell you that dog has no quality of life. And very quickly, you're not going to have any quality of life either. Because the ability to remain alone is a very important skill to health and well-being. And I'm not saying that dogs should be alone for 12 hours a day, every day, locked in a crate, but I'm also not saying that dogs should be unable to be alone for 5 minutes. And I've worked with dogs who you can't go to the bathroom without the dog coming in, because if you close the bathroom door and the dog is alone, he will be destructive because he's panicking. And what this tells me is the dog has a very low threshold for stress. Now, when we're working with a dog like that, we always have to work with the veterinarian and make sure that there is not a comorbid condition that is causing this. There are some animals who, when they're in pain or when they have intestinal distress, they will panic and they need their people. That's not the same thing. I'm talking about the dog who truly has separation anxiety. And when it is profound, and we've tried working with the veterinarian, we've tried medication, we've tried leaving protocols, we've tried downstay, we've tried, all kinds of things we've tried, and we can't fix it. At that point, to me, it is something that we do in love to release that dog so he is no longer suffering. And we are alleviating suffering. So it's a very complex question that has a lot of elements to it. The safety for the people who have to work with the animal, very, very important. The well-being of the people. When you have a dog and you literally cannot go grocery shopping, you have to have your groceries delivered to you. What's the plan for that dog if somebody has a heart attack and has to go to the hospital in an ambulance? That is a really big deal. And so we have to understand that there are really broad questions about which dogs can we help and which dogs can we not help. And what I want to point out to anybody who's listening who may be new to the training game is that if you haven't met the dog that you can't help yet, you haven't met enough dogs. And I think that's true in veterinary medicine. There are an awful lot of veterinarians who, when they graduate, they're pretty sure they're never going to have to lose a patient because they couldn't help them. And 6 months in, they're like, oh, yeah, there are some animals we just can't help, But we also have to take into account the welfare of the families, the welfare of the community, the ability of the families. I worked with one lady, very lovely lady, very good trainer, but she was in a wheelchair and she was unable to get her dog enough exercise, and the dog became frustrated and dangerous. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, but it's our fault because we should have known that this dog needed more exercise. But by the time that I came on the scene, the dog had a laundry list of aggressive incidences, and the owner was unable to help. I took that dog in for 2 weeks of training. We did not make any reasonable progress. The dog never got to the point where she was able to tolerate me handling her. Never mind tolerate having people coming and going. So we can point to something and say, oh yeah, well, the owner should have known and it's the owner's fault. And we can get all upset about that. But the fact of the matter is once the damage is done in a dog like that, we have to accept that we may not be able to fix it. What I want any trainers who are new to aggression, new to behavior to know is it is not a simple scale. It is not, nowhere is anybody going to teach you this is the absolute answer, because there's always going to be the exception. I lived with 2 dogs who were very dangerous to one another. They were not dangerous to any other dog. And my husband and I are both professional dog trainers. So we were able to live with them for 7 years. If that had been one of my clients, I probably would have told them to euthanize the dogs. But because we live out in the country, we have the facilities, we have the resources, and we have the expertise, we were able to live with these dogs. But not everybody would have been able to. And I think that that's really important. It's never straightforward. There is never every single time that this happens, there's always going to be an exception to the rule.
Yeah. So this is when the losing Lulu, I guess, when you don't have any more options with your, clients and patients, that's when losing Lulu comes into,
Absolutely.
people's mind, I guess. So you mentioned a little bit about the support that people get, that it's a grieving experience for them, it's a safe place, right? So there are also a lot of rules in Losing Lulu. You guys
There are.
monitor a lot the comments. So why is that?
Okay, so here is the thing. This is an incredibly sensitive topic. So when you come to Losing Lulu, you can only post about your experience of grief. So you can post and say, I lost a dog to a behavior problem 7 years ago, and I am still grieving, and I'm still struggling, and I'm still suffering. And people may write in and say, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm, so on. We will not let somebody write in and say, well, come on, it's been 7 years, get over yourself, because that's not appropriate. So we have to have rules to help people to understand what our culture is and what it's all about. Our culture is about helping people who are grieving. That's it. That's our whole culture. Okay? We cannot say, well, you shouldn't have euthanized that animal, because that doesn't help. The person is sad. They already feel like they shouldn't have done it. They already feel badly. And they're missing their animal and saying, well, you shouldn't have done that. That is not going to be helpful. We don't let people post and say, I have a bunny who is being very, very aggressive to my children, and I can't send this bunny to anybody else, and he's too dangerous to live with, and I don't know what to do. Because that's not what we're about. That is not about grief. That is about decision making. So we're very, very clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
We do not allow any naming, blaming, or shaming. So we would not, for instance, say, oh, well, I took my dog to ABC Vet Clinic and they did a terrible job, and I think, ABC Vet Clinic should be taken out of business and they're horrible people. We don't let that happen. And we don't even let it happen a little bit. So you can say, I had a bad experience with a trainer, or I had a bad experience with a vet, but you cannot say who. You can say, I am angry about the service that I got at the veterinary clinic, but you cannot say that person is a terrible human being. So we don't name, we don't blame, and we don't shame. We don't say, well, I think so-and-so should be so ashamed of himself because he euthanized his cat. We just don't let it happen, because that is not grief support. And I sometimes think that we just need to be really, really clear that grief support is about the person who is grieving. It's about the person who is sad. And if you're sitting in your office talking to somebody who is grieving, you don't say to them, well, it's too bad your mom died, but she wasn't very nice. That's a horrible way to be. You have to say, gosh, I know you and your mom had a troubled relationship, but she was your mom, and I'm so sorry she's not with you anymore. And it doesn't matter how you feel about, the person's mom. You don't say nasty things about the dead person, because it doesn't help the living person. And the same is true in Losing Lulu. You don't say anything like, oh, that breed is a terrible breed and they bite everybody, because that isn't going to help. And so our motto is keep it kind. You just have to be kind. It's not that hard. Maybe I think that you did the wrong thing. Maybe I thought you could have done something different, but you can't do anything different once the animal is no longer alive. So, there doesn't do any good to explore that. We allow people to post expressions of their faith. So sometimes people will say, I feel betrayed by God, or I know that my dog is in the arms of the Lord. That's fine. We do not allow people to say, and you should believe in this church, because that's not appropriate for grief. That doesn't help the grieving person. That just confuses them. We don't allow anybody to post that, well, you know, you should go and speak to this specific person because they're perfect. If you have used a memorial service, we do allow you to post links to that. So let's say that you got a really pretty urn for your animal friend's cremains, and you want to share the website where you got that, that's totally fine. Or if you got a portrait done of your animal companion and you want to say, you know, this artist did such a beautiful job, and we will allow that. So there are a lot of rules. They are posted. There are 10 of them. And one of them is the moderators reserve the right to moderate, because sometimes something comes up that we go, oh, well, we never faced that before, but we're not allowing that to happen. The one that cracks me up is the people who, they know that the list is moderated. So when you put up a post, it's moderated. And the ones that always make me laugh are the ones who post, I don't like how this list is being moderated. And I'm like, well, I'm the moderator. You think I'm going to put that through? No, I'm not putting that through.
That's hilarious.
It is hilarious. It's like people don't think about this. We also read the list deeply every single day. So we have about 20 people who are reading the list, and in the event that something is going wrong, then they read that, you know, and they're able to make that happen. And it's kind of cool that, you know, we've got that all being moderated and read, and we've got 20 people, and we have the best moderation team in the world. And, you know, then what we do is they're able to remove comments that are bad or comments that break the rules. But we also will read every single post before it goes up. And we usually approve about between 110 and 150 posts a week. So it's a busy list. And, you know, for anybody who is touched by behavioral euthanasia, if that's a list where you want to go, I would love to have you on our list. And what you can do that's very helpful is make sure that you get on every day and say something kind to somebody. You know, there have been people who have posted breeds that I would never have, and I never will have, and I don't like them. Okay, and I won't tell you what they are, but there have been dogs of that breed on, and I will post something kind, because being kind and sincere helps. And being, you know, unfailingly honest can be very hurtful. If I say, oh, well, you know, I would never have a Swedish gutter hound, which is a made-up breed, you know, that's not helping the person who loves Swedish gutter hounds. It doesn't help. And you got to ask yourself at the end of the day, if you're not being helpful, why are you here?
You know, that's right. So that's something that, like, what it's very important, because it's what is expected from users, right? But also what can they get from the group? What would you highlight from the list that they can get?
An awful lot of people who get on the list and they say, I can't tell you the number of posts where they say, I had a behavioral euthanasia 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I thought I was the only one. And one of the saddest ones was a lady who was in her 80s who posted, and she said, when I was a little girl, my dog bit my sister and my father shot him. And I always felt like it was my fault because I didn't tie the dog up. That's 70 years of guilt and grief. Wow. And when I said, look, you were a little girl and you would never expect your grandchildren to be solely responsible for the life of another animal, She said, nobody's ever said that to me. 70 years. People carry this grief for a long time and they feel very isolated. People say things like, I know my dog did terrible things, or I know my cat did terrible things, and this is the only place where I can share how much I loved him. And imagine that. Imagine if this was, we've all experienced loss in our human families. So my grandfather died. Imagine if I had nowhere where I could say, I remember driving in the car when I was a little girl with my grandpa, and he had a special booster seat so that I could see out the window. And it was really special for me to go in my grandpa's car because nobody else had a booster seat like that. Imagine if I couldn't say that without somebody saying, well, I don't want to hear about your grandpa. He was mean. That would be awful. That would be horrible. But that is exactly what happens when we have a dog with a behavior problem. The dog has bitten a child. We're terribly upset about the child being bitten. We choose to euthanize. And somebody at work says, well, I don't see why you're grieving. That was a terrible dog. We never would say that about a human loss, no matter how difficult the relationship might have been. And so for a lot of people, they have a euthanasia and they just don't tell anybody. And eventually somebody says, oh, how's Fluffy? And then you're faced with, oh, well, I don't have him anymore. And people then start pushing, what happened? And you're not feeling comfortable enough to speak about it in case somebody says something like, well, I don't know why you're upset. And that happens all the time. So I'd say the most important thing that we do for people is we give them community. And I think we are creating a community of acceptance, but we're also creating a conversation. If you think back 10 years ago, nobody was talking about behavioral euthanasia at conferences, in public. There were no workshops on it. We were the first, and we're still the biggest group that's addressing behavioral euthanasia. And so what I think is that we've opened up the possibility of discussing behavioral euthanasia as a way of humanely addressing a problem. And I think when we compare this to other kinds of euthanasia, so if we compare euthanasia for a dog with cancer, we had a dog who died of cancer about 2 years ago. Imagine if the veterinarian said, well, you're not trying hard enough because your dog still has cancer after 4 years. Imagine if what it would be like if the veterinarians could not talk at their conferences about quality of life for dogs with cancer. Imagine how we would do our jobs. We couldn't do our jobs. And I think what has happened is, because you cannot see the brain doing its job, because you cannot see emotions, people don't want to talk about it. And I think what's happened is we have brought that out into the light. And what I think is truly amazing is I founded this organization, and now sometimes I'll go to a conference and somebody will say, have you heard about losing Lulu? I go, yeah, I know it. Oh, you should join. I'm like, yeah, I'm a member. Oh, it's great, it's really wonderful. And yeah, it is. And people say, it's made such a difference in my life. And I say, I'm really glad. And I actually had one person who said, you seem to be taking a personal responsibility for this. And I said, well, that's because I founded it. Yes, I'm taking personal responsibility for that. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the people who joined it. I'm proud of the bravery that people had to start talking about this, because 20 years ago, I was at a behavior conference and they said, what else should we be talking about? And I said, we should be talking about behavioral euthanasia. And the room went silent, and it was like, no, we can't talk about that. I'm proud that I brought that out and you know, that with Trish's help to get people to know about it, with the help of our moderation team, Deb Jones was someone who helped us early on. You know, it's been possible to talk about something that was a dark and horrible secret. And, you know, think about that lady who suffered for 70 years. 70 years. She thought she was solely responsible for the death of a dog, and it was not her fault. And she thought she was the only one. And we're going to fix that. And I got to tell you, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It's something that I talk about frequently. And I think that, you know, when we're talking about behavior problems, if we don't talk about that as one of the possible outcomes, as professionals, we're not doing our job. You know, nobody wants that outcome. But I can tell you, when I talk to my veterinary colleagues, if they have a dog who's got a really bad infection, maybe they've got a dog who's got an infection that is resistant to antibiotics, and they try and they try and they try. The veterinarians are sad when that dog dies, but they also accept that that is a part of medicine. And I think that we need to be very much like that with behavior. We need that as a part of behavior. We need to understand that behavior may have a tragic outcome. We can do a lot that we didn't used to be able to do. I mean, the science of training has come so far, and we are able to do so many things that 10 years ago, we weren't doing. And, you know, I love seeing all of the different skills that are being taught, all of the different ideas that are out there in the training world. But once in a while, and not often, about 6% of my cases end up in behavioral euthanasia, and it's been consistent over the last 20 years. So out of every 100 cases, 6 of them die. Usually those are cases that came to me after they had been not treated for a long time. But, you know, if you know that, and you don't talk about it, and you don't talk about when, and you don't talk about how, and it's something that you know is happening, but you don't talk about it, it festers, and it doesn't get better. And so I'm really glad that we can now talk about it, and that we can be open about it. You know, there are an awful lot of people who still won't tell me what their percentage of behavioral euthanasias are. And if you're doing actual behavior with actual behavior problems, that is going to be the outcome some of the time. You know, and it's not always pleasant, but it is a fact of what we do. And we can help an awful lot of dogs, but we can't help 100% of them. Oh, you're muted, Deborah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's for sure. You cannot, you know, help all the dogs and all the families. In that sense, this initiative, Losing Lulu, it's amazing. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for that generous, you know, space. And summarizing a little bit the benefits for the users, it's, as you mentioned, sense of community, safe space for sharing their feelings, support. So it's really amazing. And something that I'm really impressed, and you mentioned this at the beginning, it's how big it is, like how it's been growing and growing. It's incredible.
Yep, it is.
Do you have like a since we are approaching to the end of the conversation, but do you have like a impression about that? Like what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think I've said it, you know, that I was totally surprised at how many people, if you consider that we've only been going since 2018 and it's now 2024, that's only 6 years. That's not that long for 31,000 people to join. And I'll just let you know that if there are not-for-profit organizations who need help. I do free online presentations for any not-for-profit. So if you have a shelter or if you have a not-for-profit training organization and you want a speaker, I am happy to come and talk. And I think you've got all my contact information to put up on the show notes. And I'm always happy to help with that. And I love the opportunity to speak on your podcast. Yeah, so it's been wonderful.
Thank you for your time and all your insightful, opinions and experiences. It's been amazing.
All right. Take care.
Thank you very much, Sue.
You have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.
Goodbye.
Well, we hope to have the opportunity to talk with you again, and we're gonna finish this interview. Rosa, te doy el pase a ti y bueno, muy agradecida para que tú también puedas compartir con tus agradecimientos.
Bueno, que decir que gracias por esa pasión. Básicamente, Sue, es lo que nos ha llenado y yo creo que va a encantar ver esta entrevista precisamente porque aparte lo que hacéis en Losing Lulu es espectacular. Sin más, despedir esta entrevista ya y recordaros a todos suscribiros al canal, por favor, dejar todos los comentarios que queráis, me gusta, no me gusta, que como ya os he dicho antes, básicamente este programa se hace gracias a eso y tenemos que crecer entre todos, que es lo suyo. Nos vemos en el próximo programa. Muchísimas gracias, Débora, por estar aquí, y por ese inglés que nos tiene a todos absolutamente entusiasmados y nos vemos el próximo mes. A cuidarse. Chao, Débora.
Chao, chao.
INMAB, generando conciencia.